So good morning, everybody. So as we are facing this lockdown, let us start basics of pediatric cardiac surgery. And I thought we'll talk about ventricular septal defect, which is the commonest defect everybody has come across. And there are so many varieties of defect in our unit. We have done it. So now let us see in detail about ventricular septal defects. So if you see the history of VSD, the Henry Roger was the first man to describe a ventricular septal defect in 1879. And basically, after that, in 1897, autopsy finding has been seen by S.N. Menger. Then pathology has been described in Abbott and Selzer in 1936 and 1948. The first surgery for VSD closure was PA band, and that has been done in 1952. First successful VSD closure by control cross circulation has been done by Lillehy and Associate. The controls cross circulation is nothing but they used mother as a pump, and they used mother as an oxygenator basically, and then control blood from the infant to the mother and then back to the infant. So in 1956, transventricular and transatrial approach has been seen, and 1961, Kirkland has done the first successful VSD repair with cardiopulmonary bypass machine. So the incidence of VSD, it is one of the most common defect in congenital heart defects. And isolated VSD is most commonly recognized, and it is like around 2 per 1,000 live birth. So that considered to be a very high incidence. And among congenital heart disease, 2% of defects are ventricular defects, and 50% when associated with other major defects like tetralogy of Fallot or interrupted aortic arch or single ventricle, while 75 to 80% of small VSDs, they close spontaneously by late childhood, and 10 to 15% of large VSD close spontaneously up to 1 year of age. So to understand the VSD, first we have to understand the embryology of the interventricular septum. As heart is a very complex structure, the embryology of the heart is also very complex, because the whole heart developed from one tube, one cardiac tube. It divides into the different phases of the fetal life. But we will concentrate here only on the embryology of interventricular septum. So the whole interventricular septum is formed by the three components. One is the interventricular muscular portion. I am going to detail in the next slide. Second is the endocardial cushions, and third one is bulbar ridge. Go in detail about it. You can see that we have separated the color also. So the whole ventricular cavity was initially a one cavity, and that cavity is called bulboventricular cavity. So this bulboventricular cavity has to divide into the right ventricle and the left ventricle. How it happens? So first there is a interventricular septum. You can see here in my arrow the blue sky blue color. The interventricular septums come below to upward. Second, there are two ridges coming at the right and left sided in the upper conical part of the bulboventricular cavity here. You can see my arrows here. So two ridges at the right and left sided, they come together and fuse together. And this ridge above it joined to the spiral septum, which divide the aorta and pulmonary artery, great arteries. So this bulbar septum, even we can say another term is conal septum, which joins upper to the spiral septum, and below it and meet to the interventricular septum. And the gap between all these things, there is a AV septal defect, AV septum, which gives rise the membrane, and it fuses all the three and makes the membranous septum. So the whole interventricular septum is made by all the three. So further, if we see the membranous septum, the anterior part separate the right and left ventricle. So here it is a anterior part separate the right and left ventricle, while part separate the right atrium and the left ventricle. And this is because interatrial septum and interventricular septum doesn't meet at the midline. It meets little bit away. So that's why sometimes you will see the some of the perimembranous VSD, you will see the defect in this area. You will see a left ventricular to right atrial shunt, like a Garbo defect. This is because of the this uh, problem. So now, if we summarize that if truncal septum or conal septum fail to fuse with the septal crest, then it forms the perimembranous VSD. So now previous slide we have seen that conal septum comes down. Here trabecular septum or interventricular septum goes up and membranous septums, all three meets there. So if the conal septum fails to meet the membranous and the muscular area, then you will see the perimembranous VSD. The same thing if conal septum is deviate to the pulmonary artery side. So what happens? It creates the again VSD as well as it causes the right ventricular outflow tract obstruction. So that gives rise to the tetralogy of Fallot. So that we will discuss when we are talking about tetralogy of Fallot. When truncal septum, like we have seen, the conal septum is attached to the truncal septum on the top. So when there is absence of truncal septum, then you cannot divide the aorta and pulmonary artery. So truncus arteriosus forms. When ventricular septum fails to reach the AV valve, then AV septal defect happens. Then arterial trunk stays over the right ventricle but doesn't divide. So that is comes like the DORV. Then aortic valve pushes up and right instead of pulmonary artery, that is called transposition of great artery. These are all the rotational uh, anomalies of the trunk. So this is the basics of interventricular septum and embryology of the VSD. So now we go about what are the associated defects VSD can be seen. So VSD can be seen along with the aortic stenosis, which is common in subaortic membrane, coarctation of aorta, mitral valve abnormalities. It can seen in tetralogy of Fallot, double outlet right ventricle, truncus arteriosus, some of the single ventricle. And along with VSD, you can see the other defect also like patent ductus arteriosus and all. So chromosomal disorders associated with VSDs. So trisomy 21, 40% of T21 will have VSD. Trisomy 13, 18% of T13 and 31% of T18 will have VSD. 22q11 deletion syndrome. And tetralogy of Fallot is most common anomaly, and VSD with or without aortic arch anomaly is second most common, and Holt-Oram syndrome. And recurrence of risk for VSD based on parental VSD. If paternal, it is 2%, and maternal, it is 6 to 10%. So father has a VSD, then there is a 2% chance that kid has a VSD, and mother, the kid has a 6 to 10%. So now if you go about the anatomy of ventricular septum. So this is a very basic slide. You can divide the ventricular septum. So this is a right atrium. We have taken out the right ventricle free wall. This is a tricuspid attachment. So the area just below the tricuspid wall is inlet septum. The area here, what is you can see is a perimembranous area, is called membranous septum. Then you can see the trabecular septum and outlet septum. So we have seen in embryology, outlet septum is formed by the uh, bulboventricular septum, trabecular septum, and inlet septum formed by interventricular septum. So if we go in depth, so this is the how it will look from the right ventricular side. So right ventricular side, if we see the interventricular septum, it is much more trabeculated, very rough, and the main trabecula here you will see is septomarginalis, which is called moderator band also, which goes up and divides into the anterior and posterior septa, which ultimately joins to the conal septum here. And left ventricular side of the septum is much more smoother than the compared to the right ventricular septum. So now we go in a detail of interventricular septum. So here again the right ventricle has been open and the right ventricular views has been seen here. So tricuspid valve leaflet, you can see there are multiple papillary muscles from the trabeculae, which gives rise the chordae to the tricuspid valve. The most common papillary muscle you will see is a medial papillary muscle. You can see it here. It arises from the septal marginal band. And here you can see the moderator band or septomarginalis, which gives rise anterior and parietal, which anterior supports the conal septum and parietal gives rise the which attached to the supraventricular crest, which is a and the area at this junction is a perimembranous area. So if we will talk about the conduction here, the AV node gives rise bundle of His which passes at the just at the junction of septal and anterior leaflet. Goes below the it goes below the membranous area up to the medial papillary muscles and enter to the left side. So that is why we always this is normal anatomy. So when we talk about each defect, we will see the what is the conduction relation with that VSD. So VSD has been classified in a different classification in different geographical as well as embryological way. So there was a lot of confusion was there. There is a common classification is a hybrid classification where it is type 1, which is called conal, supracrystal, infundibular or subarterial VSD. Type 2 is perimembranous, paramembranous. Type 3 is inlet or AV canal type of VSD, and type 4 is muscular. So this is one classification. It is I am going to go in detail for each, but first let us talk about different classification. So this is a hybrid classification system. Second classification is Anderson classification and Van Praagh classification. So Anderson has classified as perimembranous, muscular, and doubly committed or juxtaarterial defects, while Van Praagh has classified as a conoventricular type, which is like a perimembranous VSD, muscular VSDs. Conal type is a subarterial VSDs, and inlet is a AV canal type of defect. The most common and practical classification is like a morphological classifications where we can see it's a perimembranous VSD, which is 80% of defects are perimembranous VSD. When it has a border with the tricuspid valve, I am going to detail in the perimembranous VSD next slide. Then muscular VSD is a 5%. The definition of muscular VSD, the borders of the VSD is muscle all around. It is frequently multiple, and conduction tissue is always remote to the muscular VSD. Fourth one is doubly committed or subarterial VSD, which is 5 to 10%. And it borders both semilunar valve and conduction systems are little remote. And inlet septal VSD, which is less than 5%, which is called AV canal type of VSD also. So let us go in detail each and every VSDs. And before that, I would like to talk about the different other according to the size. How we can say that okay, this is a restrictive VSD or non-restrictive VSD. If it is less than 0.5 centimeter square, smaller than aortic wall or orifice area, small left to right shunt, normal RV output, and non-restrictive VSD. This is very vague term. Based on the size, we can say it's a large, moderate, and small. So when we can say the VSD is large, when the 2/3 of aortic annular size, or if it is more than 15 millimeter, or if it is more than 1 centimeter per square meter of BSA, and if RV systolic pressure is equal to left ventricular systolic pressure. If these are the criteria matches, one of the criteria, then we can say that VSD is very, very large. Second one is a moderate VSD. So moderate VSD is half of the aortic annular size. It can be 5 to 15 millimeter. Right ventricular pressure is half of the left ventricular pressure, and QP upon QS is less than 2. Here it is wrongly written. I think it is QP upon QS is less than 2. And the small is 1/3 of aortic annular size, insufficient size to raise the RV pressures, and QP upon QS is less than 1.5. So these are the based on the, we can say the large, moderate, and small. So now let us talk about each VSD in a detail. So first is a perimembranous VSD. The perimembranous VSD is also called conoventricular or junctional VSD, as we have seen in embryology that perimembranous area is mainly a junctions of all the three uh, interventricular septum, conal septum, and membranous septum. All three has a meet at that point. So that's why it's called junctional VSD also, or you can say it is conoventricular VSD. So here it is often associated with anomalies of outlet septum and adjacent structure. Now, if you see perimembranous VSD, the classical perimembranous VSD you will rarely see. Either you will it will have an extension into the outlet area, or it is extension to the iliac area or muscular area. So when it is a second thing, one more important thing is the margin of this perimembranous VSD. So if you see the posterior margin, it is made by the parietal band or a posterior wing of the septum marginalis band, which anteriorly it comes conal septum, and inferiorly it comes the tricuspid annulus. Here you can see the aortic wall, and the most common area of the aortic wall is a NCC to RCC commissures. You can see from perimembranous VSD. So association of perimembranous VSD is always with the NCC more than the RCC compared to subarterial VSD. Here sometimes you will see a lot of abnormal chordae attachment crossing the VSD, and sometimes this thickness of the tricuspid leaflet or membranous septum start closing the perimembranous VSD, and it can give rise the aneurysm formation also, and this can either cause the RVOT obstruction. There may be a multiple fenestration in the this closing defect. So underlying large VSD, but effective shunt will be very small because it is closed by the septal leaflet. As we have seen in embryology, the perimembranous VSD, the membranous area between the right atrium and left ventricle, if there is a defect on that area, then you will give rise the LV to RA shunt. So there is a Gerbodet defect, which is also one of the variety of perimembranous VSD. So conduction part, if we see, the conduction tissues goes from the posterior inferior angle. So the as we have seen the it is normal AV node situation, bundle of His passes just below the perimembranous VSD, And then at the level of papillary muscle, he enters the left ventricle. So whenever you are closing the perimembranous VSD, the posterior inferior margin, you have to be careful and you have to take a stitches little away. So this is about the perimembranous VSD. Now we talk about the doubly committed or subarterial VSD. So here you can see in the picture the VSD is in the conal area where both aortic wall as well as pulmonary wall are exposed, and there is no muscle or fibrous tissue dividing the pulmonary wall and the aortic wall. So, and as there is a parietal band of the septum marginalis separates that to the membranous area, the conduction tissue is far from the VSD. But sometimes you will see the subarterial VSD with an extension to the perimembranous area also. So you should be very much oriented about the anatomy when you are dealing with a large subarterial VSD. Usually it is a moderate to large size with outlet portion of RV and LV, and it is more beneath the right coronary cusp. As we have seen in perimembranous VSD, the non-coronary cusp and right coronary cusp commissure is the commonest, comes into while here it is more beneath the right coronary cusp. This VSD is very common in Asians, which is rarely seen in other countries and African countries. It can be a circular, diamond shape or oval. Sometimes it is a transversely oriented. So in echo, you will see the small VSD, but in reality, because of the transverse oriented, it is a large VSD. Again, the aortic and pulmonary cusp are separated by very thin fibrous tissue because there is conal uh, area is absent. And RCC and rarely NCC may prolapse into the upper margin of the defect. And sometimes it prolapse in such a way that it started closing the VSD. So shunt size getting smaller. Along with that, aortic regurgitation will increases. That we will see in later. Posterior inferior margin, as I've already spoken, the parietal band of the septum marginalis, it divides it from the perimembranous area, and that's why the conduction tissue is little far. But be careful for large VSD when there is a perimembranous extension. The third variety is inlet septal VSD. So 5% or less have an inlet septal VSD, which is called AV canal type of VSD. Now here we have to be very careful when we term about the inlet septal VSD, because you will see a lot of muscular VSDs at the inlet area with a small muscle band divides the VSD and the tricuspid annulus. So that doesn't classified as inlet septal VSD as a classification. Here, when we talk about the inlet septal VSD, it is typical like a AV canal type of defect where the posterior margin is formed by the uh, AV valves, while anterior margin is formed by the interventricular septum. So anterior margin is muscular and crescentic, and it can extend superiorly to the membranous septum. It is almost associated, in most of the cases, it is associated with AML cleft. So whenever you are dealing with inlet septal VSD, make sure that you take care of or at least visualize the AML because it is associated with the AML cleft. And rarely there is a tricuspid valve straddling. You can see. One more point here is like any AV canal defect in this kind of inlet septal VSD also, the AV conduction is pushed the anteriorly and laterally. So normally the bundle of His enters at the junction of tricuspid annulus and interventricular septum. So here you can see my arrow. So normal AV node is situated at the angle of cog, but here it is pushed down and it gives rise the bundle of His enters the junction of interventricular septum and tricuspid valve, and then it and goes to the left ventricular side. While in inlet muscular VSD, your conduction bundle is normal and it normally goes anterosuperiorly. So it is very important to differentiate inlet muscular VSD and inlet septal VSD. So always consider inlet septal VSD like a AV canal and try to close and take care like a AV canal to prevent the conduction tissue. Along with that, you have to repair the tricuspid valve and the mitral valve. We'll see it later. So muscular VSD, as I have told, basically interventricular septum uh, in the trabecular areas in different part. If you see the VSD, which is bordered by muscle all around, it's called muscular VSD. It is mainly classified like a inlet muscular just below the tricuspid annulus. Outlet muscular you will see in the conal area, but here you have a muscle all around. And trabecular VSDs, which is VSDs at the moderator band level, or it is a anterior VSDs, or it is apical muscular VSDs. So trabecular VSDs has been divided by mid-muscular, apical, and anterior VSDs. So mid-muscular VSDs at the level of moderator band. These muscular VSDs are frequently multiple. So whenever you have only isolated VSD, muscular VSD, you make sure that there is no associated other defects. The mid portion of trabecular septum is most common at the level of moderator band and may be overlaid by the moderator band. So whenever there is a mid-muscular VSD, in echo sometime you will see the two VSDs because moderator band divides the shunt. So in echo you can see that there is a two VSDs, but in actually from right side it is you can see the one large VSD below the moderator band. The anterior muscular defects are usually multiple and most often are in apical and outlet portion. The inlet muscular defect, there is a muscle between tricuspid valve annulus and the VSD. And whenever there is a multiple VSDs, it's called Swiss cheese defect. And here there are all different varieties of muscular VSDs present. They are sometimes obliquely oriented, so the opening in the right ventricle and the left ventricles are different. And in this muscular VSD, as the conduction tissue is situated normally, it is always far from the muscular VSDs. As I told you, in inlet VSD only, it is situated anterosuperiorly, but otherwise conduction tissues are not near to any muscular VSD. So pathophysiology wise, there are two determinants of pathophysiology. One is the size of the defect and second is a pulmonary vascular resistance. As the size is more, shunt is more, and that gives rise to the increased pulmonary blood flow and increase the pulmonary vascular resistance early. Second is pressure gradient across the VSD, shunt volume across the VSD. We know that in neonatal age, pulmonary vascular resistance is high, and as a child comes to 2 months of age, it start falling. So the large VSD, which is situated at neonatal age, which will shunt more after the 2 months of age, and it can cause increased pulmonary artery pressure which is initially a flow related, and later on, after 1 or 2 years of, after 1 year of age, more specifically, it gives rise the secondary change to the lung. As due to VSD, the pulmonary vein return is increased, so left atrial enlargement you can see, as well as left ventricular overload also you can see. Pulmonary hypertension initially is flow related and reversible. And later, because of the intimal proliferation and medial hypertrophy, leads to fixed irreversible pulmonary artery hypertension. So as pulmonary artery hypertension increases, or secondary changes in the lung increases, PVR increases, and shunt across the VSD start decreasing. And at the stage when PVR increases more than SVR, then the left to right shunt becomes reverse to right to left shunt, and that is called asymmetricized VSD. So that is a final outcome of unoperated large VSD in an older age. With the small VSD, there is a resistance to the flow across the VSD, hence QPQS is rarely more than 1.5. And with moderate VSD, QPQS is less than 1.5 to 2.5, and this small and moderate VSD less likely to give rise pulmonary vascular disease. So if you see the natural history, if we not operate this VSDs, what will happen? The spontaneous closure is known for a small VSDs, but not for the large VSDs. Only the 10 to 15% of large VSDs up to 1 year of age can close, but small VSDs, chances of closures are very high, while subarterial and iliac VSDs rarely closes. The pulmonary vascular disease, large VSD expose the patient to the risk of developing increased pulmonary vascular disease. As I told you initially, because of the flow, it is a dynamic pulmonary artery hypertension, and as the changes in the lung start happening, it becomes irreversible as time goes on. So initially PA pressure is more dynamic, and later on at 1 to 2 years of age becomes irreversible. Children with moderate VSD have normal or mildly elevated resistance up to first decade, and later on chance of development of severe pulmonary vascular changes are very rare. So in small and moderate VSDs, they are actually protected for the pulmonary vascular diseases, while infective endocarditis is very rare and is more common in smaller moderate VSD, and chance is around 0.15 to 0.3% per year. If we not operate the certain VSDs like subarterial VSDs, as I told you, it will start prolapsing the aortic cusp, mainly the right coronary cusp, and that is because of the Venturi effect. So what is the Venturi effect has been shown in the picture. You can see there is a shunt at the VSD, is a pulmonary artery aorta, and this is the right coronary cusp. So in diastole phase, when blood returns back and closes the aortic valve, this blood pushes the right coronary cusp toward the VSD. Along with that, the shunt through the VSD from left ventricle to right ventricular also pushes towards the cusp to the right ventricular side, causing the prolapse of the VSD. So effect of it, the VSD shunt gets reduced, but along with that it causes deformity of aortic wall and cause aortic regurgitation later on. In 5 to 10% of children develop infundibular pulmonary stenosis, and that is the mechanism of that one is different. It may be shunt-related fibrosis to the RV flow, which is called Gazul effect. Sometimes the prolapse of the valve or aneurysmal membranous tissue can bulge into the RVOT and cause rise the infundibulous pulmonary stenosis. Certain cases, you will see the VSD along with that malalignment of the coronal septum, either anterior or posteriorly, and that gives rise to the pulmonary stenosis or LVOT obstruction. And this infundibulous stenosis protect the patient child from the development of pulmonary vascular disease. But in certain extreme cases, the pulmonary stenosis is so severe that VSD starts shutting right to left, and you can see the cyanosis. And these are the patients sometimes present with a double chamber right ventricle also. So clinical features, I am not going to go too much into the clinical part, but just giving a very small idea about the clinical features. The grade 1 is a small ventricular defect and patient is normally asymptomatic. You can see here the murmur. Grade 2 is a frequent respiratory tract infection. Basically the grading has been done according to the size of the VSDs. So in moderate VSD, you will see the frequent respiratory tract infection and congestive heart failure symptoms like sweating during the feeding or failure to thrive can be seen, but it is very rare. And functional aerobic capacity is usually moderate, really reduce with early fatigability. While in large VSD, you will see the more frequent respiratory tract infection and some cases a frequent hospitalization because of that. Failure to thrive, along exertion, congestive heart failure, it's frequent. Like when child is breastfeeding, you will see the rest suck cycle as well as the sweating over the forehead. This is very common in large VSDs, and along with that trichopnea. And functional capacity is markedly reduced. And grade 4 is Assemger complex, where you see the cyanosis. In examination, the pulse pressure is relatively wide because of large volume. Precordium is hyperkinetic with a systolic thrill at left sternal border. S1, S2 are masked by the pansystolic murmur at left sternal border. I am going to show you a nice picture of all this oscillation in the next slide. So let us read this slide. In left second space, you will see the widely split sound with loud P2 according to the pulmonary artery pressure. The delay diastolic murmur at the apex and S3 and presence of mid diastolic low pitch rumble at the apex, which is caused by the increased blood flow across the mitral valve if it is a large VSD when QPQS is more than 2. In small VSD, you always present with the loud pansystolic murmur. So as murmur is loud, it means the VSD is small. So you can see the typical VSD pansystolic murmur you will see from throughout the S1 and S2. And you can see the wide split of second sound A2 and P2. The different VSD with PS, VSD with AR, you can see the different auscultation finding. The X-ray chest gives rather good clinical picture of the child. You will see cardiac enlargement, including the right atrial, right ventricle, left atrial enlargement, pulmonary vascular plethora, you can see the vascular markings are very prominent. When you see this kind of picture, you know that this child has a large VSD and which is a operable. So cardiomegaly is one of the very important sign in X-ray to decide the operability. The next X-ray is a child with asymmetralization, where you can see the very small heart, very prominent proximal pulmonary artery. The pulmonary artery base is really prominent here as well as here, and the peripheral arborization of pulmonary arteries are not seen at all, and that is called pruning of outer pulmonary vessels. So these are the pictures where you can define that this is severe pulmonary artery hypertension and most probably asymmetralization. As VSD is associated with other defects, the detailed echo is very, very important. So don't just see the VSD and complete the echo finding. Always make sure that you see each and every aspect of the heart and connections properly. In VSD, we have to determine the VSD location, extent, size, how much shunt is there, what is the PA pressure, and what is the gradient across the VSD. Examine the tricuspid and mitral valve also, outflow morphology, RVOT, LVOT, as well as relations of the aorta and pulmonary artery. Chamber size are more important because some of the large VSD will see small is left ventricle. So the mitral valve and tricuspid valve Z score is important for the operability and the type of operations. And we have to rule out other associated defects like PDA and coarctation of the aorta. So 2D echo is the diagnosis for VSD, and you can determine your operative decision on 2D echo as well as operability also. The cardiac catheterization, it's normally rarely done only to see the borderline cases where you are not decided that patient is operable or not operable, or it is a gray area between operability and asymmetralization. So that is where cardiac catheterization help. So in cardiac catheterization, you can just do the oximetry data, pressure data of right ventricle, left ventricle, aorta, and pulmonary artery, and you can measure pulmonary artery resistance. But ultimately, cardiac catheterizations gives rise the pictures that if you can operate, what is the risk of the patient, and patient is really operable or not operable. But that again, because of the newer vasodilatory medications like bosentan and sildenafil, it is questionable. So in treatment protocol, the small VSD, normally small VSD doesn't require a surgery or any kind of intervention if patient is asymptomatic. And 75 to 80% of VSD is closed by 2 years. So I just follow up annually, and we have to just take care of infective endocarditis prophylaxis. But when we have to operate the small VSDs, whenever the small VSDs with increasing aortic regurgitations or new set of AR with small VSD, then surgery is indicated. That is mainly seen in subarterial VSD. If it is a chamber dilatation in LA or LV dilatation, then surgery or device closure is advisable. If any episode of infective endocarditis in small VSD, the VSD has to be closed. If increasing RVOT gradient, and if RVOT gradient goes more than 60 millimolar Hg, then you do the VSD closure as well as RVOT resection. And certain cases like airline industries and army, for complete medical fitness, even a small VSD has to be closed, because VSD closure in this situation consider a cure. So the one of the indication is medical fitness also. For large VSD and moderate VSD, there is no doubt that surgery is indicated. But here the question comes the timing. So medical treatment for a large VSD you can give up to the age of 3 months of age. And later on, electively, you can take the child for the surgery. If infant is symptomatic despite anti-failure medications, then surgery is advisable as early as 2 to 3 months of age. With large VSD, waiting for the surgery is not advisable because this infant, if he can get the uh, respiratory tract infections or pneumonia, then outcome is very poor. So it is always better to operate large VSD as early as possible after the 3 months of age. There are certain compensated CHF like large hemodynamic significant VSD with left to right shunt. They are asymptomatic, and these are the children you can operate at 6 to 12 months of age. The children with the Swiss cheese septum in infant age, the PA band is ideal because you cannot able to access all the VSDs in a very small age. But if it Swiss cheese septum at a little bigger kid, you can try to close all the VSDs as a VSD closer. So when we talk about the surgery of the VSDs, there are different approach depending upon the location of the VSDs. So there are standard 5 approach. I can say standard 4 approach because the left ventricular approach is rarely used. The right atrial approach, transpulmonary approach, transaortic, and infundibular approach. So these are the 5 approach. We should know which case we should use that. Certain VSDs, as I told you, like perimembranous VSD with outlet extension, or confluent VSD, conoventricular VSD with perimembranous extension, require multiple approach. So you should be aware of all this approach. I am going to discuss all approach in detail later on. The VSD can be closed by the different patch material. So the material which we can use is gluteally head-cuted autologous pericardium or Bowen pericardium, Dacron patch, or PTFE patch, which can be a 0.6 millimeter PTFE patch or 0.4 mm PTFE patch, or it can be a direct closer with pegylated stitch. So when we talk about the patch material, every material has its advantage and disadvantage. Like autologous pericardium is readily available, very cheap, but the chance of aneurysm for a large VSD is very high. So in small VSD, yes, autologous pericardium can be used, but not for the very large VSD. Second is Dacron patch. Dacron patch is a very uh, porous, and there is a disadvantage. So the chance of infective endocarditis is high, while it is a little cheaper material than the PTFE patch. So that is the advantage. PTFE patch is an ideal patch. The most disadvantage is the cost because it's a very costly material. But as it is an inert material and his suturability is very good, so PTFE patch is considered to be the ideal material for VSD closure. It can be 0.6 millimeter or 0.4 millimeter. 0.6 millimeter is little thicker, while 0.4 is very friendly to use. And a direct closure, whenever there is a small VSD, longitudinal varieties, the direct closure can be done with pegylated stitches. The technique of VSD can be a continuous stitch technique or interrupted stitch technique. And certain cases you can do the combination of continuous and interrupted stitch technique. In our unit, more than 5 kilo child, we use the continuous stitch technique, while the less than 5 kilo, we use the interrupted stitch technique. The sutures what we used is 50 pledgeted fluorine sutures for more than 5 kilo child, while less than 5 kilo child we use 60 pledgeted fluorine. The basic principle of VSD closer, whenever you take, you should have a complete idea of location of the VSD. You should prepare before you go into the surgery. So watch echo by yourself along with the help of cardiologist. So you know that what is the exposure approach you are going to use it. So proper exposure is very important point for the VSD closer. Second important point I always feel is the sizing of the patch. If your patch is small, then there is a chance of conduction block or stretching of the conduction or arrhythmias. Second, there is a chance of cut through later on is very high. So always size your VSD properly, and your sizing the patch is very important. Little bit bigger size is okay than a smaller size, but it should not be too big, which can give rise the dog hair also. Third one is whenever suturing of the patch with proper care of conduction tissues, aortic valve and tricuspid valve. Because we have seen in anatomy that desired structure always comes in connection with the VSDs. So whenever you are suturing the patch, your technique should such that you are away from the conduction tissue. You are not compromising the tricuspid valve, any of their chordae, and you are suturing with away from the aortic valve also. Your bites into the muscle is important. It should not be too shallow or not too deep, and it should be longitudinal to the VSD to prevent the cut through of the muscle. And at the end of the VSD, you should not have any residual VSD. So your VSD should be completely closed. So these are the 5 points are very, very important whenever you take the patient for VSD closer. Keep this 5 point in mind. And once you close the VSD, before you release the cross clamp, always check for residual VSD. That can be done by injecting saline into the left ventricle through the mitral valve. So you can put the catheter to the interatrial septum to mitral to LV, inject the saline, and check through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricular cavity. So this gives rise, if any residual VSD is there or any additional VSD there also, you can able to find out at this point of time. And second thing is tricuspid valve leak. So whenever you are closing the VSD, you are coming near to the tricuspid valve. So before releasing the clamp, just put saline in tricuspid valve and check the tricuspid valve. So, so now we'll go about the perimembranous VSD closer. So in perimembranous, any VSD closure, you establish the cardiopulmonary bypass by aortobicaval cannulations. You give the integrate cold blood cardioplegia or diel nido cardioplegia according to your convenient of protocol. And here we open the right atrium after the cross clamp parallel to the AV groove. We put it inside the interatrial septum to vent the left atrium. So vent has been inserted to interatrial septum to the left atrium. Now we put a stay suture to the right atrium, and the two VSD retractor has been used to retract the tricuspid valve. So you can use the either VSD retractor or malleable retractor. And after that, once you assess the internal anatomy, the first thing is to measure the VSD. Measuring of the VSD, always we use the silk thread. So at the junction of the tricuspid annulus and upper edge of the septum, we hold the silk thread and then measure the length of the VSD and follow by the breadth of the VSD. Spending the time at this stage is always better than having a complication later. So when you are taking the patch, always take little bigger than this measurement. So the length and width of the patch has been seen. So 0.4 mm, we use 0.4 mm PTFE membrane, PTFE patch. We trim patch properly. At our unit, we use continuous suture technique, 5-0 plated stitch. Here, the first stitch in different units, they have a different protocol. At our unit, we start at the posterior inferior level, away from the free margin of the VSD, at least 4 to 5 millimeter away, preventing any injury to the chordae, and then pass the sutures to the PTFE patch. So you can see our stitches are away to the free edge of the VSD and without injuring the chordae. After that, we bring down the patch and place through VSD into the LV, and we'll tie the stitch, and the one limb of the stitch will start continuing anteriorly, and other stitch will take it out to the tricuspid annulus. This is what we take care of the chordae. After completing the anterior part of the suturing, the lower edge of the patch, we suture to the tricuspid annulus by this continuous stitch technique. Here you can see the patch, tricuspid annulus, pericardial plagate, again pericardial plagate, tricuspid annulus, and patch. So this is a standard closure of the perimembranous VSD. Once you close, you can just make sure that tricuspid wall and is normal. There's no leak in the tricuspid valve, and then you inject into the left ventricle and check the residual VSD. So in perimembranous VSD, there are certain special scenarios you can see that if there is a large anterior leaflet, then the access to the upper edge is very, very difficult. So in that scenario, you can divide the anterior leaflet at the just keeping the 1 to 2 millimeter at the annulus, and that gives rise a good that gives rise a good exposure to the upper edge of the perimembranous VSD. And later on, after VSD's closure is over, you can resuture the anterior leaflet. The same technique can be used for anterior extension of the VSD. Whenever there is outlet extension, you can either tackle that area with the infundibular incision along with the transatrial approach. When there is a lot of tricuspid valve tissue and chordae are restricting the vision, again the septal leaflet and anterior leaflet division helps to closure for the VSD. Sometimes the aortic cusp is prolapsing and adherent to the upper part of the perimembranous area. So whenever you are taking sutures at anterior superior area, make sure that your suture doesn't take any bite into the aortic cusp. So always take care of injury to the aortic cusp. So if your sutures are away in posterior inferior area, then you are safe with the conduction tissue. The second thing is subpulmonic or subarterial VSD. Subarterial VSD, you can have exposure by two ways. If it is more toward the subpulmonic region, you can access through the transpulmonary approach, where you can do the transverse incision in pulmonary artery. After that, you put a stay sutures and retract the pulmonary valve, and you have a good exposure of VSD below the pulmonary valve. As we know that there is no conal tissue in this VSD, your suture has to pass through the pulmonary annulus, and to prevent the dehiscence, always use the pledget when you are suturing at the pulmonary annulus. So either you take the continuous technique or interrupted technique, use the pledget stitches to give a strength. Second point in this case is the VSD patch should be perfect. Here, if it is a large patch, then it can bulge into the RVOT and gives rise the gradient to the right ventricular outflow tract. So your patch should not be large in subpulmonic VSD, otherwise it will cause the RVOT gradient. Third point to remember in subpulmonic VSD, when you are suturing to the aortic side. Whenever you are retracting and watching inside the right ventricular cavity through the pulmonary valve, your suture should be at the muscles, and always be away from the aortic valve. Your aim is to come at the junction of pulmonary valve and the muscular septum. And once you enter there, your suture should come out from the pulmonary annulus side. So your sutures are not going to go near to the aortic valve at all. Sometimes if you are not vigilant, your last stitch can take a bite of aortic wall and it can give rise to aortic regurgitation post-op. So it's always better to away the pulmonary valve, aortic valve. Your suture should pass through the pulmonary annulus and it should be pledgeted to prevent the dehiscence, and your pad should be adequate, not a large size. Third approach is infundibular approach. The outlet muscular VSD, where it is away from the pulmonary annulus, where you have a good muscle to suture below the pulmonary annulus. This approach is a good approach. Your incision should be below the pulmonary annulus at 1 to 1.5 centimeter below, at the area where there is not much coronary crossing. After transverse incision, you can retract gently. Here, make sure that your retraction is very gently, otherwise that can extend and injure the left coronary artery. So be clear to your assistant that your retraction is gentle. The VSD closure through this approach is easier approach because you have a good margin to suture all around and your conduction tissue is away from the inlet VSD. Inlet VSD exposure is to the transatrial approach. Here, as we know that it is like a AV canal kind of VSD. So your approach of VSD closure is similar like a AV canal VSD closure approach. You can do the VSD patch. First of all, you measure the VSD, the length as well as after that you take a proper size of the patch. Here the conduction comes very laterally. It is pushed outward at the junction of tricuspid annulus and interventricular septum. So these are the area where you can, my arrow you can see, these are the area where the conduction tissues are there. So your suture should start from there and close the VSD. And other edge of the VSD is close to the tricuspid annulus. In inlet VSD, one more thing, as I told, you have to examine the AML also. So if AML has any cleft, you can close by opening interatrial septum, check the mitral valve and close that also. In muscular VSDs, inlet muscular VSD, here the exposure is to the triatrium. The conduction tissue is at anterior superior level. So whenever you are taking the sutures at anterior superior level, be away from that. And other edge of the VSD, you have to close with suture with the tricuspid annulus with multiple pledgeted sutures. Trabecular VSD or mid-muscular VSD. Sometimes single VSD looks like a double VSD because of the large moderator band crossing it. So you have to retract it gently and close it. Certain people devise the moderator band to close that, but we try to avoid dividing the moderator band because it gives rise to right ventricular dysfunction postoperatively. So try to avoid cutting down the moderator band and make sure your VSD patch, either intraplate suture technique or continuous stitch technique, you can close completely, either one patch or two patch. And outlet muscular VSD, you can have exposure through the infundibulum or through the right atrium, depending upon the exact locations. Certain apical muscular VSDs are below the moderator, away from the moderator band, where the exposure through the tricuspid wall is sometimes very, very difficult because the visualization is obscured by the moderator band. So in that situation, the apical ventriculotomy is very important approach, where you can your incision is at parallel to the LAD at the apex of the right ventricle. Through the incision, you can divide the trabecula, which is coming into the way, and interrupted prejudice sutures are placed with the full thickness, and you can close the VSD with this approach. And after that, you can close the defect in double layer. So these are the commonest approach of the VSD, and there are tips of the VSD closure. When you come out of the cardiopulmonary bypass, make sure that you've done a good job with the VSD as well as the conduction tissue and other structure of the heart, and taken care of other associated defect. There are certain cases where there is a severe pulmonary artery hypertension and borderline operability, where PVR is nearly 7 to 8. And in that situation, there are new technique called double patch technique or left valve technique. There are a lot of modification in this technique. There is a cruciate incision. There is certain people use only the fenestration alone. And this technique has a flap sutured on the left ventricular side, and it is kept in such a way that it opens to the left ventricular apex whenever there is a increased right ventricular pressure. So this is one of the. So here I am not going to discuss about the device closures and all, because it is going to be a very large topic again. So that's it about the VSD closure.